go. The second half of tonight's program has a little humor, a little, what's the opposite of humor? Sadness, grief, some heavy stuff. But we're going to go on a journey. We're going to continue going on this journey tonight with our remaining 2 speakers. They have actually been with me the longest for this particular program. We first intended on doing the Confidence Catalyst here in August, which, as I think about it now, was a terrible idea because school starts and it's hot here in August. So, as luck would have it, as Sammy would say, the universe aligned. And when I said, I think we need to move this, it struck me with lightning and said, do it in November. And I said, okay. And Jeana and Elle had already signed on to say, hey, we are ready. We are ready to be brave and bold and share our stories and dig deep and really figure out who we are and define who we are. So they've been with me since what, June, I think? I don't know. And it's been so much fun. If you don't know Jeana, probably you all do because she's the most amazing connector I have ever met in my life. Jeana was like, you know what, let's fill this thing up. And she did. She connected me with the other speakers. And she really had a big hand in making this event come to fruition tonight. So for that, everybody please thank Jeana. Thank you. Yes. So now, after 5 months of working together, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you our next speaker, sharing her crazy story, and I'll just let her tell you all about it. Please welcome to the stage, Jeana Nunez.
So, as I'm standing here on stage, it's all kind of crazy because when I sat with April at the beginning and she told me to dig deep, and she told me I would find my story, and I started writing and writing and writing, and I found that I had to tell the story that I've dug so deep and not shared for so long. And but it's the story that I'm supposed to share tonight, so I'm going to share it. So I first want to ask each of you to think of the word impossible. And then I want you to take that word and break it in 2. I'm possible. Every time you see that word or you think about that word, I want you to think about breaking into 2. That's how it's spelled, right? So I'm going to paint you a picture of what a hot mess looks like and explain a little bit further. So let me take you back to a night that felt more like a scene from an action movie than real life. It was about midnight, and I was sound asleep, and I was jolted awake by a loud crash. And I looked out my window, and it was just like, oh, geez. We live on a lake, and we were in the massive windstorm. And we were in the middle of a basement project, and my husband's tools and boards and all the things were outside. So I rushed downstairs and got my 3 teens, because they were still up, and woke my husband up. And we rushed outside. We rushed out into the chaos, and the wind was fighting against us at every turn. We were grabbing boards and trying to walk with them, swaying and getting everything done. And Fernando, in the meantime, headed to the lake. So flashlights were dancing in the light, and we were just gathering everything as fast as we could, trying to get into the house. As you can imagine, it's kind of a nightmare mess, right? Well, Fernando headed to the lake to go be able to check on all of our things. He was checking our kayaks and our paddle boards, and we'd just gotten this big water trampoline, a 15-foot behemoth, complete with a launch pad and a slide. It was anchored in the lake, so we're good, right? Nope. Right as he opened that gate, the trampoline propelled itself onto the shore, trapping my husband momentarily between the launch pad and the trampoline. So now we were on a rescue mission to get my husband. So we went out and we decided we needed to manually deflate this trampoline so that we could free him. So we all started laying on top. Each one of us took a side and we started manually deflating. Well, it worked. We freed him and he went inside the house. And he went to go get the deflation pump to be able to speed up the process, because remember, we're still in a massive windstorm. There's 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts, And it's crazy town out here, right? So things were going okay until they weren't. All of a sudden, I felt it. That all too familiar feeling. My body was giving way. Because of all of the stress and the chaos, my body was starting to shut down. My potassium had dropped, and that meant trouble. And so here I lay as it's deflating, and now I know that I no longer am going to be able to move. My kids called out because, we're still in this chaotic mess, and I answered them in a slurred, mumbled voice, and they knew what was wrong. So they ran for their dad. So here I am, laying flat-faced on the ground on this deflating trampoline as gusts of wind are happening, and I'm just picturing myself getting launched into the lake. Helpless doesn't even begin to describe how I felt. I couldn't move. The trampoline had toppled over me, and my kids couldn't see me. They just could hear me. They knew I was somewhere in that mess. And so Fernando came, and he got me back safely to the house, but it was quite an adventure. So now I'm a rag doll. So he had to lay flat on his stomach. You've all met my husband. So he had to lay flat on his stomach, pull me onto his back, and walk into the house carrying me like this, with my kids on the opposite sides, making sure I didn't fall off, all while the wind was still blowing, right? So then we get inside the house, we get comfortably inside the home, I'm in bed, and I start talking to my kids in perfect Spanish. And they look at each other and like, oh, great, mom's in Spanish mode again. You see, I served a mission in Paraguay, and I learned a second language. And my brain, as amazing as it is, when it doesn't know how to get the words out properly in English, just reverts to Spanish. So think of Buzz Lightyear. You know when in Buzz Lightyear in the Toy Story movie and all of a sudden Buzz Lightyear gets switched to Spanish mode and they're like, Buzz is in Spanish mode, turn him off. That's kind of how my kids felt. And they looked at each other, they didn't know what I was saying. Luckily, I'm married to a Latin who does know what I'm saying, and they all agreed that they all need to learn Spanish. That was just a snapshot of my life with hypokalemic periodic paralysis, or HPP, because honestly, who has time to say that whole mouthful? But it's the only version that my 4 kids know. It's the only version they have ever known. And it's a journey filled with constant obstacles and surprises. Because with this disease, you never know exactly what's going to happen. My husband likes to joke that I am like a Ferrari that runs on premium gas and burns through extremely quickly. So I'm high maintenance, I guess you could say. I like to say it quality maintenance as he corrects me, but I take more potassium in a day than anyone should. Anyone else would die, or it would at least give them a heart attack. But that's my everyday life. That uncertainty, though, has woven every aspect into our life, becoming as familiar as breathing. So HPP is a neuromuscular disease that affects my muscles, leaving me temporarily paralyzed, unable to walk, talk, or even move. Oftentimes, I can turn into a rag doll. And most mornings, I don't know how it's going to go. I used to push them away a lot and think I was fine. I'm fine, until I wasn't, I would fall. And I've learned now to listen to my body. But I used to think that needing him was a weakness. And now I've realized that it's a gift. It's a gift of love. I've realized that true strength is letting others help us when we need it. My journey has not been easy. In fact, it's been everything but easy. I have been in more ER visits and hospital stays and horrible experiences than I could probably write a book about. and diagnosed with everything but the truth. I had so many doctors look at me thinking they knew what was right and would just diagnose me with this, that, or the other. Or a lot of them just told me it was in my head because, all the answers came back normal. And all the tests came back normal. My blood work, my EKGs, my MRIs, everything always came back normal. Because when my potassium drops, it's ever so slight and it's in my muscles that they could never catch it. It's a very, very rare disease. Anyway, so what happened though was 7 years ago, things changed. My mom went to an event at BYU. And when she was at this event, you get to choose the different classes you go to. And this particular time, she had chosen a class that she was going to go to, and she found herself in another room. And when she found herself in this room, she realized that that's not the room she was supposed to be in, but she knew she was supposed to stay. So she did. And as she stayed, this woman on stage that was in a wheelchair started sharing her story. And as my mom listened to the story, she realized that this story was like mine. She felt like she was telling my story. And so she knew she needed to go and talk to her. Now, anyone that knows my mom, I love her to death, but she is an introvert. She will walk to the opposite side of the road to not talk to somebody when I'll walk to the other side of the road to talk to somebody. But she's also one that really follows the Spirit, and she knew she needed to talk to this woman. So this angel named Jeana came into my life. Jeana told her what she had, and she called me and told me. And I said, Mom, it's not that. She said, you need to talk to her. And I said, Mom, I was already diagnosed with that 7 years ago. It's not that. And what had happened is 7 years previously, I had had a really terrible attack. I was in my 3rd trimester with my daughter. And there's a lot leading up to that attack, a lot of divine intervention. But in this moment, a neurologist came into the room. And at the time I was taking seizure meds, I was not able to drive, and I had been taking seizure meds for 3 years. And this doctor said, oh, I've seen this before. And he diagnosed me with HPP. Well, the problem was he didn't know how to treat it. So he gave me a certain medication, didn't realize that potassium was a huge piece of the puzzle, and gave me a $250 bill for writing me a letter so I could get my driving privilege back. But I had just decided that it was just another misdiagnosis. But I knew that I needed to talk to this woman. So I did. I called Jeana. I talked to her, and she told me a little bit about her story, and I could not believe how parallel our lives were. You see, Jeana, her disease has progressed a lot further than mine. And so every time a new aspect of my disease comes, because it continues to progress, she is there, and she's like that guiding light for me to help me be able to navigate the new changes. But not only that, Jeana was there for my very first doctor appointment. She connected me with my doctor, and she came to my first appointment. And she's just been that constant in my life. But that discovery was like a missing puzzle piece to the lifelong puzzle that I had been trying to figure out. It was like the answer had finally come. From then on, I stopped asking, why me? And I started asking, okay, God, what do you want me to learn from this? That mindset transformed me. It transformed my life. HPP stopped defining me. With God, it started refining me. You see, we don't get to choose our circumstances. We do get to choose how we respond to them. And we can choose to respond to them and ask, why me? Or we can choose to respond to them and look at what is the lesson here and who am I to help in this process. I learned to manage my disease pretty well, and things were going pretty great until they weren't. Thank you, perimenopause. I didn't even know that existed until it hit me dead in the face. So for a month and a half, I went without walking. Every morning I would wake up and I couldn't walk. There would be a few hours maybe in the day that I'd walk for a little bit and my potassium would drop again and I was back in my wheelchair. And I was pretty much in my wheelchair for a month and a half straight. And I'm an eternal optimist. However, in that moment, my fire was starting to dim. And I was starting to wonder if this was my new reality. But you see, I wanted to go to this event, and I knew I needed to be there. And it was this event called Ignition Point Live. So the night before, I wrote in my gratitude journal as if the day had already happened. I wrote how I was so grateful that I had woken up with tons of energy, walking, and all the people I met. And the next morning, I woke up walking with energy and drove to the event. Little did I know the trajectory change that was coming, though. So I sat in the front, and as I sat, this man came on stage named Jeff Griffin, and Jeff was in a wheelchair, something I knew pretty well. And Jeff continued to share his story of how he was a BYU football player, and he had an accident, a freak accident actually, and ended up paralyzed. And he went to 16 different doctors trying to find one that could tell him he would walk again. Because he was determined to be able to walk hand in hand with his wife and to walk his daughter down the aisle. His speech was incredible. He talked about creating habits, and he talked about the impossible. And then he did something, and he said something to me that made me never see the word impossible again the same way. And he said, "Impossible? I'm possible." And he stood up from his wheelchair, and he walked across that stage. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. It was beautiful. But in that moment, God spoke to my heart, and he said to me, "Jeana, you are meant for greatness. You are meant for more. And your story is meant to be shared." So at that moment, I knew I could no longer hide this part of me, that this part of me was meant to be shared. But that had reignited that flame inside of me. And that was my ignition point. At the Ignition Point Live, I had my own ignition point. And my purpose was regained. And it was incredible because I realized that I could embrace my challenges and help others in the journey. And that's what led me to become a women empowerment coach. I know that women have so much power, but we're doing everything all the time. We're trying to do it all. And the problem is that we put ourselves last. And so as a women empowerment coach, I wanted to help empower women to put themselves first. My journey with HPP has been, though as messy and unpredictable as it has been, it has prepared me to deeply connect with these women. I help them turn their hot mess into a holy success because I consider myself a hot mess, and that's okay. I'm finally ready to own it. And that's the amazing thing is when you truly own who you are, that's when you take your power. So I recently also discovered that I have ADHD. I did not know this before. Thank you, perimenopause. Another blessing from perimenopause. My husband tried to tell me a few times, but it was always my husband and my kids that had ADHD, never me. However, these challenges, along with all of the other challenges that we have at my house, if you were to come to my house, we have the most neuro-spicy house in the neighborhood. And don't get me started with the mental health journeys we have been on with our boys and still continue to navigate. That's why I can help those with their challenges, because I understand them and I've been through them. So with that, I went on a journey. You see, for a long time, I was that wife and mom that just did everything for everyone else. I put myself last. But what I didn't realize was I was hurting everyone around me in the process. Because when you put yourself last, you have nothing to give. So I discovered 10 tips, And I'm going to give one of them tonight, and the other 9 are, well, you can get them on that download over there. Just scan that QR code, and it's there. But the first one I want to give you is refill your cup. You can't fill from an empty cup. You can't. And when you put yourself first, and you actually make yourself a priority, and you do daily self-care, then you are a better mom, you're a better wife, you're a better business person, you're a better person because you have something to give. So now, I proudly own who I am. Perfectly imperfect. You don't have to have it all together to make a difference. You don't. You don't need to be perfect to find joy, peace, and purpose. Every struggle we face is an opportunity to grow into the people we were meant to be. Each time I face the impossible, which has been many, many times, every time I fall, I get back up. You can't keep me down. I've taken it and looked at it from a new angle. I turned that impossible into I'm possible. And I want you, the next time that you face your next challenge, to do the same. I want you to ask yourself and ask God, instead of why me, what is the lesson I need to learn here? Because every challenge we face is a stepping stone into who we are supposed to be, a refining fire that holds us into something, that molds us into something better, something greater, something stronger. As I stand on the stage, it all comes full circle. Because this is the very stage where my ignition point happened. So it was very ironic when I was able to connect Sean and April and find that my first time speaking on stage was going to be on the very stage where my ignition point happened. But I'm here to tell you that each of you has the strength to rise. No matter what you are facing, you have it within yourself, the strength to rise. One of the reasons I love coaching the most is because every single one of us have everything we need inside of us. It's just my job as a coach to help you unlock those puzzle pieces and find those pieces. Every single one of us are meant for greatness and have limitless potential. So I want you to turn the impossible into I'm possible. We all have our struggles. We all have our storms that we're going to face. Those things and challenges that almost seem impossible, but they're not. And I know deep in my heart that they are meant to refine us, to guide us into the people that we were meant to be. So tonight, let's embrace the messy. Let's embrace the hard. Let's embrace the beautiful and the grace that comes with every step of our journey. And let's turn those impossibles into I'm possible. Thank you.